Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope everything's going great, as I always say, and in this video, we got some deep wood stories, which are some of my favorites. So, let's jump into it. Pull up a stump, and let's get into it. Thank you for watching. So I had something really weird happen to me as a kid. I was camping in Wales, Florida. I was a part of this big Boy Scout group, and we were out in the middle of nowhere. An appropriate description would be a sea of grass and trees. And, as all kids do it when they're out in the middle of nowhere and with a big Boy Scout group, we were playing hide and seek. So I climbed up into a tree like a bunch of other people because that was really the only way to hide here. And 20 minutes pass, and I wasn't the most popular guy, so it wouldn't be the first time that they left me behind by accident to do something else. So I think, alright, I'll just get down out of the tree and I'll go back to camp. But on my climb down, the branch that I put my foot on snaps and I fall 10 feet to the ground. And I pass out. I'm unconscious. I wake up next to the fire. They found me just outside the tent line, passed out. They assumed that I was dehydrated. Now here's the part that's weird. I thought that somebody came to get me, but everybody else was accounted for at dinner for the last 10 minutes at least, and I fell out of a tree half a mile away, and everything seems fine. I'm just a bit sore, and then I notice that my wrist is bruised like somebody dragged me. So I've told this story to other people, but here goes. I was driving my family through the middle of nowhere. It was very misty, and it was nighttime, and it was cloudy, so there was no stars. It's a country road with no lights, just trees on both sides. My dad is sitting next to me. He's talking to my mom in the back. My siblings are asleep in the back as well. And I see somebody walking off to the side of the road a ways down ahead of me. This is sort of weird for being so late, but I figure that maybe it's just the city boy in me speaking, and I think nothing of it past that. But then as we get closer to the person, there's this flash of light in front of the car. I'm talking like a blindingly bright light to the point where I saw nothing but a greenish white light for a solid 3 to 4 seconds, and then all electronics go out, but the engine is still going. But the headlights, the air conditioner, all my dashboard lights, the radio, the head unit, everything's dark. And I know that a car doesn't run without electricity, but it was so weird. My mom breaks out praying. There's absolutely no light, so I start slowing down to stop. My dad says to keep going. I say, "You want me to what?" He says the road is straight, dead straight, so just keep going. So I keep going, but I just drive slow. And about 2 minutes later, all the electronics start turning on slowly, one by one. The trip after that was very uneventful. I still don't know what happened, and I have no explanation. When I was 11 years old, I was at this scout camp, a Girl Scout camp, in the Pine Barrens. I was volunteering. It was sleepover night this time. So we're sleeping in these army surplus tents. They're the kind that have the flaps on all the sides that can be rolled up. We're getting ready to settle down for the night from the campfire songs and spooky stories and whatnot, things that you do on a Girl Scout camping trip. A couple of girls head off early to get stuff ready like lanterns and whatnot at the tent site. So after some time, we're all ready to head off to the tent site to join them. But then, we see them running back toward us, screaming, with flickering flashlights. And like I said, we're in the middle of the Pine Barrens. It gets pitch black in here whenever the sun goes down, so no light can be pretty scary indeed. We walk back with them. The young campers we're watching start crying, and we do the best that we can to calm them down. The head counselors in charge make the stupid decision to make us all roll up the tent flaps, making the tents pretty much just tarps over our heads. They say it's some BS about how the air will get too humid in the tent with everyone breathing and something about camp policy. After a while, everybody begins to calm down, and then we start hearing these weird noises in the distance. The only thing that I've heard that's even close to it is a Tasmanian Devil getting pissed off that someone took its sandwich. The sound gets louder and louder. We think that someone is pulling a prank on us or something. We make some calls, and everyone else in the camp is at the other end of the grounds, a mile and a half away, and they don't hear anything. Everyone gathers in one tent. The sound gets louder and closer. It's a very sleepless night. Everyone is crying off and on from fear. Eventually, the sounds fade off into the distance, and the distressed ones stop. We wake up in the morning and start searching for evidence about what the hell just happened. We find a deer carcass that's pretty badly mutilated, mostly in its vital organ area. When I was younger, I was in Cub Scouts. This is the Canadian version of Boy Scouts, but it has some Christian overtones to it. So we're at camp, and this camp has 4 cabins, and we're playing a game called Predator or Prey to learn about the food chain and stuff. There are groups in this game too. There's carnivores, herbivores, omnivores, and diseases. If you get tagged by a higher food chain player or a disease, you lose. So I played an omnivore, and I was collecting food cards that were placed in the woods by some of the leaders, and I was hiding from diseases and carnivores. I spent like 4 hours wandering around in cool November weather, wearing my thin cub uniform. It was freezing, and I was walking through these dense woods. I'm hearing all kinds of animal noises. And then a sound sticks out. It feels like I'm being followed. I keep looking around trying to see anything, but I can't see anything. It's too dark. It's blackout. So I start jogging my tubby ass further into the woods, and I end up getting lost. But these noises are still getting closer and closer, and I think I better get my spooked badge for this. I turn around, and I see the shape and a little bit of the fur of this giant bear 50 yards away from me. I run through the woods, jumping logs, and get even more lost, and I end up climbing a tree. I stare into the darkness, and I see this pure white buck eating grass in a clearing. The buck turns to me and blinks real slow. I feel safe, and I climb out of the tree, and I go toward the buck. And then it's like the buck is leading me, so I follow. I follow it to a big highway that's 3 kilometers away from my camp. And then I see that look from the buck again, and I keep following it. And it leads me all the way back to my camp. I get near familiar looking territory and near my camp, and then I get tagged by one of the diseases. I think it was rabies, and I lost the game. And when looking around, the buck was gone. I did get 3rd place though. The game ended up going well into the night until 3 a.m. Now it's been 9 years since then, and the woods still don't spook me. I feel totally at home in the forest. I feel like it was almost a spirit journey that made me one with the woods. So when I was 16, I was camping up in the mountains of Pennsylvania, and it was at this summer camp that's for guys only. So it was this camp-wide manhunt. The manhunt is like hide and seek sort of, but all the kids in the camp were to run and hide, and a few counselors were the ones to seek them out. So me and my 3 friends just decide to go chill by the lake. Now this is an extremely wooded area. There were paths around the camp and a large common area. The lake was surrounded by trees. We're just chilling there, throwing rocks and talking shit about how dumb this kid game is and stuff. But then we hear movement in the trees, and this guy walks out. His clothes are all tattered. He's super pale. His left arm looks like he was mauled. And in the other hand, he held this big long knife or machete or just a sharp thing. We think it's a counselor at first from a little ways off. And we think, oh, well, you got us. Guess we'll just chill now. And then the guy starts walking toward us. And we noticed that the guy's arm was bleeding, but the blood never hit the ground. So we all got up, because we're a little on edge now. We're prepping to run out of there. But the path is blocked by this thing or this person. My bigger friend runs over and tackles the dude, and then we all run out of there. We book it out of there and to the common area. The camp loudspeakers play taps, which means that everyone needs to get to the common area. Regardless of what you're doing or what's happening, you need to drop everything and go. And then we take a head count. Everyone's there. All the campers have to head to the bunks. The counselors have to stay up and do rounds. Usually, it would be 1 counselor for the entire camp, never more than 3, and they would be on shifts. But suddenly, it's all eyes, all night. My cabin was by the lake, just a minute past it. And we walk by the lake the next day, along the path. There's no blood, or really any trace of the guy. And my friends get really spooked when they can't find any blood either. And then we obviously can't do any outdoor activities for the next day. But then something else weird happened. The owner's 2 dogs just disappeared. And a week later, at the same camp, it's the same 3 of us that are chilling by the lake because we're apparently dumb and don't learn. The lake has this small island in the middle that no one goes on, and it's around 7 p.m. or so. It's still lightish out, but everyone else is doing camp stuff, like stuff you do in the evening. And we see the trees on the small island moving a bit. It's kind of far away, but it looks like a grayish deer that's standing up on 2 legs and walking around. My friend pulls out his camera and zooms in on it. His face goes white. He says, its left arm looks beat up, and we all just get up and we all leave. I live in New Jersey. The woods here are very peaceful where I live. I very much enjoy hiking through them, riding my bike and just enjoying the scenery. I live in a generally secluded area where houses are all a quarter mile to a mile apart. This story happened when I was about 20 years old or so. This one Saturday, I was pretty bored, so I hopped on my bike and I plug in my headphones and I pack some beers in my book bag and I planned to be gone for the day. I love doing that kind of stuff, and I still do, to be honest. I had a very creepy driveway, about 2 to 3 miles from my house. It's super long and lined with willow trees on either side, and at the end sits this old Victorian-style house. My words don't really do this place justice. It's just really creepy, so just imagine the creepiest Victorian-era house you can think of. Nobody ever saw anybody come or go to this house. There was a lot of talk in the community, but as you know, people would rather just talk and spread rumors than actually go and knock on the guy's door and introduce themselves. I decided that I'm going to investigate. As the day got chillier, I pulled my hoodie up and I banked a right into his driveway. Something in my body told me to turn around. Something's not right, but I didn't listen. I continued on. It was a dirt road, littered with potholes. It had rained heavily the day prior, so it was muddy, and mud had kicked up all over myself. At this point, I was halfway down his driveway, and I could vaguely see the house through the trees, when I heard a door slam in the distance. I didn't even wait to see what the noise was. I turned my bike into the trees on one side of the road and tried my absolute best to blend in with the woods. I army crawled backwards while dragging my bike. I didn't really care about bugs and ticks, and I just chameleoned myself as best as I could. I heard the sound of wheels kicking up dirt. He was coming down the driveway. I braced myself for the sound of his brakes as he drew closer to me, but they didn't come. He just drove by. He hadn't noticed me. My heart was going insane. I was terrified. I laid still for an extra 5 minutes just to be sure. He was gone. I debated myself on what to do. Do I just go home while I wasn't caught, or do I continue investigating? Being young, stupid, and I had a couple beer buzz, I decided that moving forward was the only option. My heart was still racing. I got back onto the driveway. I brushed myself off and rode my bike up to his house. No one was home. I dropped my bike while realizing how far away from anything and everything I was. It was a very unsettling feeling. The house was completely normal, it seemed. I wasted my time, I thought. I got back to my bike, and at this point, it was starting to get dark, and I pedaled my way up his driveway, asking myself why I had just trespassed on this dude's property. I was now angry with myself. He was just a normal dude like me and everyone else on the street. Those thoughts dropped on the priority list as I recognized the sound of wheels hitting dirt. He was making his way home and was coming down the driveway. I panicked. I went nuts. I didn't know what to do. I did the first thing that came to my mind. I ditched my bike and threw it in the woods and booked it through the forest. I never ran faster in my entire life. I got about 500 feet before a stickler bush tripped me up, and I slammed face first into the wet, leafy earth. Without skipping a beat, I popped right up and continued sprinting. I managed to turn around and see if I was being followed. Through the trees, I could see a shadowy figure under the porch light. I could make out his outline. He was staring right at me. He wasn't saying anything. He wasn't moving. He was just watching me. I made my way to the street, right in front of a neighbor's house. I had run about 2 miles through dense, wet forest, and I looked pretty messed up when I finally came out on the street. I was really pissed about the bike, but I knew if I had to make the right decision again, I would do the same thing. He didn't know me or my bike, and I had never been in trouble before in my entire life. I've never even gotten a detention. By the time I got home, that evening my parents were in the basement. I snuck upstairs, I showered, I cleaned up, and I ran downstairs to grab some food. I was thinking about how much I'll miss that bike. I laid in my bed that night and I dozed off right to sleep. I awoke the next morning to my mom screaming at me. "What the F did you do to your bike, you ass?" I shot out of bed. How did she find out? I thought to myself. She led me to the back door, where I could see into my backyard. There was my bike, hanging from a tree. This happened in 2014, so I'll try my best to get the details together. I was at a friend's house, and we decided to go explore around the neighborhood forest. And we take this little trail, which is also a levee, that goes through the woods and is on the edge of a suburb at the same time. So we get to the other end of the trail, and to the left there's this big field with a few silos and about half of a broken down, really small warehouse type of building that he hadn't seen before, and he's been living there for most of his life. So we do what most any adventurous people will do when confronted with something new. We investigate. We get to the first silo, and there's small bones that are scattered around. They were probably dead mice or some other rodent or something. There isn't anything special about the other silos at all, but this one had like a thick piece of metal that was leaning against the entrance, so we didn't get to go in that one. To the side of the silos where we suspect that there were other silos there, due to the marks on the ground and similar platforms, we find some old-looking bullet shells, probably from a rifle. After we're finished with the silos, we go on to that half of a warehouse-looking building. The place only has 3 walls and no roof. There's about 5 fire extinguishers and a faded fireman's hose or something of the sort. There's a sign that's there, and there's some disconnected transformers, the electrical kind, not the robots. But the most interesting thing was a jug that had this really dark red substance in it. My friend, being the fearless little friend that he is, decided to open it up and smell it. He said it wasn't like anything he'd smelled before, and it was extremely strong. Well, after a while of guessing what it could be and just bullshitting around, we decided that we should look around some more. To our surprise, there's a trail behind the warehouse that's still not far from the neighborhood, so it's connected to a rocky road that leads to houses and stuff. We decided to explore this trail, which had a sign saying private property and stuff, but we were kids, so we didn't really care. So we start walking down this trail, which is supposed to be guarded by one of those low yellow fences or gates or whatever, but it was wide open this time. And the trail is really long, but it doesn't curve that much, so we can see the end better as we get closer and closer. As we walk toward the end, we can hear this pumping sound that gets louder and louder, but we stop to listen for these rustling sounds at the side of us a few times, and every time we stop, the rustling stops. When we finally get to the end, I don't look around the tree line because I figure that if there's still active security cameras in the trees, it'll catch my face and I don't want to get in trouble, so I only have my friend's account of what he saw when looking around. He saw some broken down machinery that was still pumping what we expect to be natural gas because the pipeline's still there. And there were signs of like warning people, no smoking, and like warning of an open flame. So we figured that we've had our fill of this little area, so we start to walk back. And as we're walking back, we turn around because of the rustling noise, and behind us there are these 2 large brown figures that came up out of the swamp and out of the woods at the end of the trail. One of them does like a waving motion, and the other one just stands there. And we don't know what the hell these things are, so we just start running. And that's the last we saw of them. It looked like they were starting to, too, at the end of it. But we stopped when we got around the warehouse for a small break. After catching our breath for a few seconds, we run back to his house. And when we get back, we see that he had a few missed calls, and a few people had texted him those automatic greetings that were on the old Android phones for some odd reason. Now would be a good time to mention that my cousin had called him before we entered the trail, and there was only static on the line apparently. When we get back to the house, somebody keeps calling him, but we don't really know the number, so we keep hanging up. Then another blocked number calls, and it's static, but in the background you can hear this weird laughter. With all of this funny stuff happening, we decide to call the cousin back, and the whole time that we're talking to her on speakerphone, there's static and there's whispering in the background. And then after a minute or so, a very discernible voice comes up and says something that I couldn't quite make out, and then the phone goes dead. We did go back to that area a few times after this, and we didn't find anything interesting except for one of those times. As we were walking back, I see another trail, We only go down it a little because there's a big ditch that runs through it. But as we get close to it, what I can only describe is something that looks like an alligator with a tail that looked like, I don't know, a watermelon was stuffed into it. It just had a really big bulbous thing at the end. I didn't really get a good look out of it, but it scared the hell out of me, so I just got out of the area. After we consider our options, we go back to where we were and we investigate further. We look in the mud, and all we find are these weird goat prints. So after everything that happened there, we just didn't go there again. But we did talk about it quite a bit, and we came to the conclusion that this must have been something like a Goatman or something, or some kind of shapeshifter. But something that I have learned is that the Goatman may work in groups, because those two big-ass Bigfoot looking things that ran after us. If you think or you know what this is, please let me know. I don't really know what happened that day. And that story was by someone known as Poster. So this next story is from Eastern Europe, and the English isn't really that great in it, so I'll try my best to kind of fill in the gaps. 7 years ago, I just turned 18, and as the year went on, it went into December. So for Christmas, we usually travel to a family cabin in Bosnia, which is Eastern European and Balkan. The entire country is mountainous. We stay after Christmas and New Year's to go to this mountain cabin like I mentioned. It's used by some other relatives, so they are already there. I'm the oldest of the children, and I've just turned 18, so they decide to take me hunting with them. As I soon find out, there isn't much to hunt there, but they simply use it as an excuse to get away from the wives and children for a few days. And I'm thankful to them, to be honest, because being around that all the time can be stressful, and everyone needs time away. It's relatively big woods, especially big for a relatively small country, and we arm ourselves with these old World War II weapons. We had a bunch of them stashed in the cabin's basement by joint forces of all sides of the war. I do know that some of them were partisans, some were Wehrmacht, some were just soldiers, some were SS, and some were from extended family. They all came together and stored their weapons in this cabin, and after the war, they all basically got back to getting along great somehow. I don't know. The guns were kept clean by them and the other relatives, so they work fine. I shot from guns only a few times before this, so we take our tents and our supplies and we go deep into the woods. There's 4 of us. There's my dad, myself, my mother's brother, and my mother's cousin. We'll stay here 3 days, and we do this to get, quote, lost in the woods. The first 2 days, we do nothing but shoot at birds and drink beer that we brought with us. We also had a portable barbecue that we set up as well. The last night before heading back, my dad opens fire towards something. He says that he saw a deer. We all think this is unlikely, since even though it's a large forest, as I mentioned already, there isn't a lot of wildlife here. Dark falls relatively early in the winter there too, 16:30. Everybody is already inside of their tents. I stay out by the fire, and I see the, quote, deer off in the distance. I grab the rifle, and I fire at it. It doesn't do what a deer does. It lets out this blood-freezing roar, and it honestly scared the hell out of me. My dad and the others get out of the tent. I say that I shot something. They say it must have been a bear or something because of the noise, and they get their guns. They want to hunt it down so it doesn't come back at us. I'm not sure if it will, but I don't complain. My uncle actually has some kind of German assault rifle that he brought with him, and we all go after it. We find a blood trail and footprints. Now, none of my family are expert hunters, so they have no idea what to do or what it is. We follow it for half an hour, but then it starts to snow, and a storm seems to roll in, so we just decide to return to our tents. The whole night, we heard all kinds of noises around the tent, very weird growling. The wind is blowing hard, so it has to be loud in order for us to hear it over top of that. My dad says that it's best that we don't do anything, because if it's a bear, it will be hard for us to kill it. We expect for my uncle to shoot it with his assault rifle, but he never does. All of us get very little sleep. The next morning, we find more blood around the tents. Whatever this is has a lot of blood in it. We decide to go back to the cabin. It's only 5 kilometers away from us. After an hour of walking, we hear the growling and the roaring again, and we start to get our weapons ready. It follows us the whole time, but we can never see it. We fire several times into the air to try and scare it off, but it doesn't work. At some point, fog starts to roll in, and my mom's cousin falls down and hurts his ankle pretty badly. As we're trying to get to him to help him up, I notice something moving in the fog. It's giant. I tell my dad. He gets the gun, and my uncle gets his gun, and they fire at it. It growls again the same time as last night, as it's hit, but by now, we know that it's not a bear since it's far, far too big. It takes us longer to get back with an injured guy. We eventually come to the edge of the woods in the cabin, and we're there by nightfall. We hear the growling only a few times. We tell the women what happened, and they think it's a bear. It's the only rational explanation, they say. Since my cousin hurt his ankle pretty badly, we decide to just go back the next day and not finish our stay at the cabin. We just kind of get the hell out of there, as you say. I and my dad tell the story to the partisan grandfather. He says that there were a few stories about giant bears during World War II and his time in the woods. He says that they would sometimes find German outposts completely deserted and German soldiers would be tore up and mutilated. He also said that he heard similar stories from other extended relatives who were in the SS. Now, this story I liked because I actually think I know what this is. So since it's in Bosnia, like I said, a very mountainous region, there used to be quite a population of cave bears there, and obviously we know that cave bears are extinct, but it's always believed that there are certain small pockets of those big megafauna, the word is, that are still around. And it's weird that I found this story, because you know how when you're a kid you kind of hyper-focus on certain things for a while? Like, when I was a kid for a while I wanted to be a paleontologist, and then an Egyptologist, and then I wanted to be a horror movie director and stuff like that. But I had a time when I was just focused on megafauna, and cave bears is one that I actually read about, and I still have the book. So I thought that was cool. I don't know, maybe I'm kind of more excited than I should be about it, but it was cool to hear a cave bear story. But yeah, let me know which one was your favorite story down in the comments. Do you have a story of your own? I have an email address below that you can send it to. And if you want to donate to the channel, you can do that too. You can like and subscribe and all that good stuff. I want to thank you all for pulling up a stump with me to hear some stories. And I will see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.